What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Keep Klimbing podcast. Been working through some relevant topics the last couple weeks. Last night, the Blue Jays won Game 7. I guess when this airs, the World Series will be in full swing. Hopefully, we don't have another 4-game sweeper, but maybe Brian is rooting for that. Really excited. Give a quick special shout out. Longtime friend, family friend, Ricky Meinhold. Is with the Blue Jays, so that's certainly who I'm rooting for in the World Series. I hope it's a 4-game sweep the other way, Brian. But really excited for him. Awesome Game 7. If any of you guys, got to check it out, I didn't see the final of it because I was putting my kids to bed. But a lot of the highlights and everything is awesome. That energy that comes from those games is just you can feel them through the TV screen, certainly, and that's what gets us all hooked to it, no doubt. So really cool, really special shout out to him. Really excited for him and his family and everything that's coming up for them, this next week and on from there. But this episode, I really wanted to talk about this in an episode and talk more about the trajectory and long-term progression of pitching development. Okay. And that's the topic that I kind of coined this, or the title, right? The trajectory of pitching development and how to build the modern arm. Okay. What I mean by that basically is what the angle I want to come at this with is from a training age standpoint, versus biological age. And what I mean by that basically is biological age is going to be physically how old you are, right? I'm 32, about to turn 33. If you're 14, you're 14, okay? Training age means more about how long you've been training, where you fit into that overall training age, how many years you've acquired in that. It's talking more about your skill and where you're actually at with your skill and your physical development. Very obvious, example to give you guys is that for a younger player, younger athlete, puberty is going to hit at all different times. So you're going to have a 16-year-old that is fully grown, mature, maybe beard, and you're going to have a 16-year-old that is still tiny and prepubescent seeming. So training age, I wanted to quickly define that. That's going to be kind of the angle that I come at this with. And how we look to go throughout this evolution, I think is really important. One huge caveat that I want to start with is that I'm going to talk through some of these different stages. And I mean very obviously that we can't neglect certain things at certain times of the year, meaning strikes when a topic that I'm going to talk about is movement quality and athleticism. There's definitely relevant topics during the time of year that make the game go round. The biggest thing that I mean is that, let's keep the development objective the main thing during these different times of the year. Understanding first and foremost, this game's really hard. No matter if you got the bat in your hand or you're on the mound, it's really hard. The margin for error is so small. But let's keep the main thing for these athletes. And, this is how, with my son at least, and take this for what it's worth, this will be for sure what I try to focus on from my experiences with my boys. And that's kind of what I wanted to set the tone for this conversation, moving forward. Obviously, when we're in a game in April and my son's pitching or whatever, right? We're going to be talking about strikes, okay? But my main focus in the back of my head as I'm watching this is more of the process of where he's at in his overall training age to get that outcome of strikes, and not being too quick to say, forget all that other stuff, just throw strikes right now. I'm fortunate enough to look through this in a lens of what is he doing right now that's going to breed him success on down the road, without being so quick to say I need to see success and trophies and wins and strikes and velocity and whatever right now. I think that's some of the biggest misconceptions that I hear from people and players and families, all different ages. I don't care if they're 12. I don't care if they're 25. The idea that you're chasing velocity or pitch design or sequencing or any type of arsenal development too soon is usually some of the biggest culprit, because of a topic called training economy, essentially just meaning time. That the more we divide our time, the less focused our training and our objectives get. Okay, so that's kind of the misconception, if you will, the angle that I'm going to come at this conversation at. Okay, I would say that elite development happens in layers, and these very specific layers. Okay, from movement to strength to arsenals to execution. Okay, that's a zoomed out 30,000 foot view. Those are the big objectives. That happen, and I think they have to happen in that order, at least from a focus and a priority standpoint, to set us up for long-term sustainable success. And that's the point. Okay, that if you're going out and you're chasing velocity, it's really not that hard to get players to throw hard anymore. Okay, you can go buy a set of weighted balls and you can go download a velocity program that you found on Google, and you can do that and you can go, but at what expense? Okay, maybe you do gain some velocity. You're certainly, heightened sense risk of injury. Are we throwing the command and execution of all of that like out the window to achieve that? And none of those things are fruitful in the long term. And that's ultimately like what we're trying to build. Okay, you really cannot build sustainable stuff as a pitcher without a body that moves efficiently, produces force effectively, and you understand how to deploy that arsenal with quality intent behind it. And I think that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's the sentence I wrote down that as I was thinking about this, like that's the point. Okay, so go back to our layers here real quick. If I had to boil them down in as few, one word possible, or one word for each section, as few as possible, I'd go movement to strength to arsenal to execution. Okay, and I'm gonna work through all of those different segments. Each of the segments, full segments that I have typed out here would be movement, quality, and athleticism first and foremost. Okay, next is going to be strength, capacity, and force production. Okay, next is arsenal development and pitch design. Pitch design definitely gotten the big, trendy buzzwords lately. Arsenal development, pitch design, how your pitches move. Okay, and then you're going to get into attack plans, sequencing, execution, things of that manner. Okay, so for the first segment, strength, capacity, and force production. Okay, the difference between baseball strong, maybe, of what I would say, and just like strong, normal athlete strong, football player strong, okay, is that baseball strong definitely to me is something that really shows up on the field. I've seen so many people work out in the gym and seeing guys that are really strong in the gym and seeing guys that like aren't really strong in the gym, and they produce the same sort of outputs or success on the field. I've seen guys that can vary on all that, and they have very varying outcomes on the field as well. Okay, so but there's a really big difference between being strong and then having like usable strength. Okay, strength that's going to produce success, longevity, okay, and repeatability. Okay, and we talked in previous episodes, about force production and the rate of force development and why all those matter. If you guys really want to deep dive on that, I'd recommend going back and checking out that episode that I did with Nolan Rapay. We talked about that at really great lengths, okay? And the summary basically is that those things really matter before we get into like too tip of the spear, maybe niche-y conversations, because they're really like what lays the foundation for your success to catapult off of. Okay, we'll talk about some of the building of the capacity and the volumes for the intensity throughout the season, the off season and in season, necessities and priorities for the strength. How we're going to transfer from the weight room to the mound, and like what all actually even carries over there. And then some of like integrating data and everything, into that. But as far as the movement, quality, and athleticism piece starts, to me, that's where all of this really like begins. Okay, and what I'm gonna try to do, it's gonna be very generalized, and I apologize for that. What I'll say is that this all should be a very intentional individual conversation for every single player. I'm going to try to put some biological ages attached to each one of these segments so that you can start to like wrap your head around where you might fall into this. But again, remember, it's skill specific. Okay, so our main segments, I'm going to touch on them again: movement, quality, and athleticism, strength, capacity, and force production, arsenal development, pitch design, and then your attack plan, sequencing, execution. Okay, so movement quality, when we talk about movement quality, okay, the biological age, first and foremost, that I will say that I think this like fits into is going to be like your, early stages of introducing baseball, where training and practice starts to get a little bit more serious. You're kind of past the, let's go get ice cream after the game. I'm going to keep taking my kid to ice cream. I don't know about you guys. I like the ice cream. But, as far as like that movement quality, you want to start talking about like training or practice objectives. Like we're not doing that at 6 and 7, I don't think. There's definitely some things about the game you're trying to teach them and whatever. But, movement quality, definitely, and athleticism definitely laid that whole foundation that's something that, for the right kid, for the right player, for the right family, that could be at 8 years old, No, it could start as early as that. And I think for the right player, that could also extend all the way up to like 13 or 14, That's a huge window. And I don't mean that's the one that's going to be the most vague, basically because all of those players at those ages have very different, structure. They have very different, maturity levels, mental or physical. Now, you really got to do a good job, I think, as a parent or a coach of players those ages, figuring out where these guys are at, in that kind of section. But it can really vary. Okay. Movement quality, what we really mean when I say that is like, mobility, stability, and sequencing. I want my son to have like really good ranges of motion in everything that he does. At those ages, it's really not about like putting weights in their hand, right? It's not about like loading up a bar. We're not loading up a bar in any like youth programs or whatever. We're just trying to get them to move in ways that the sport is going to demand for them to move, or ways that we know really complement the way the sport's going to ask them to move. Okay, so we want good mobility, stability, sequencing. Pitching and or hitting is such an athletic movement. It's such a complex movement. The more we think about all the mechanics that have to go on for it, usually the worse we do them. Usually the worse we repeat them. Usually the worse we execute our pitch with them too, or swing. It's a really athletic movement, and it's not just a mechanical one, right? I read a cool quote the other day that said something to the extent of like, we don't ascribe to a mechanical model. We ascribe more to, the body's output creating the mechanics, okay? And like thinking about why and how your body moves the way that it does, producing the mechanics instead of just going straight to the mechanical cues and fixes. So understanding like some of the key importances, of those movement constraints, some of those things, and having an eye for that, educating yourself as the player or coach, the parent or coach, for that younger player, I think is really critical. Understanding like what things really limit performance, really limit sustainability of that performance, or injury risk factors. Okay. Some of those things, if you're not aware of those things, some of those things to me that I'll watch when I am watching my son play is some of his arm action details. We really want the arm to stay like compact and tighter to his body. The further we get away from it, the harder it is to rotate. The timing, where his hand at is in space relative to the time that his front foot hits the ground, whether he's throwing across the diamond from third base or he's throwing on the mound, that doesn't matter. Okay. Some of these things like really don't need to be looked at just through like a pitching mechanics lens here. If he's throwing a football, it's all the exact same way. Okay. Those things I'm going to go in order because I'm kind of going out of order right now. I apologize. I'm going to say these things through kind of a pitching delivery. And I just want you to know that it doesn't matter really what he's throwing. Okay. But first and foremost is like the first move. When he gathers, is he balanced, and is he establishing a good balanced foundation to create direction towards the plate? Because if he's like lifting his leg and his head and his core is moving, it's going to be really hard to time any type of sequence up. Okay. The next thing that I would really focus on is through their separation, are they creating enough of a load with their body? I often describe this as like the rubber band effect. Is he using his body to throw the ball, or is he really just relying on his arm? The more we can, move from the middle, use the center parts of our body to deliver a throw, the less stress goes on our arm. Okay. Then we get into the kind of the arm action and the timing at foot contact. I think that's a really key indicator on all of our, biomechanical markers and details like that at our lab. Okay. Then we're going to look at kind of the trunk's rotation and the reaction, with the ground, that the lead leg should be firm and stable to rotate against. Because if it's not, our trunk's not going to be able to rotate as fast. Okay. And then as we release the ball, do we get through good pronation? Landing leg is still, firm against the ground. The trunk kind of, the trunk kind of extends towards home plate. And then we kind of go through some of our deceleration pattern, understanding that we can only accelerate as fast as our body will allow us to decelerate. Okay. So those would be kind of some of the things I would look for in that sequence as far as movement quality in the throw is concerned. Okay. When you're doing training sessions with young players, I think movement screens can be really, really valuable. And some of those assessments can start to guide what these players work on, what they need to work on. I think at younger ages, it's really a good idea and a valuable idea to hit a lot more of the, generalized things we know are good for them, because most all of them, especially the younger they get, could use some general mobility, stability, and sequencing fundamentals through all of that. But as they get older, you could even create a progression within inside of this initial segment that as they get older, you could have them be doing more individualized, drills or exercises that are going to help specifically the way they throw. Okay. Some of those things I would really watch out for, like I said, maybe some real world examples, if you will, is arm action things to me are really, really big and important. I already mentioned the arms getting like super far away from the body. A lot of times they can get their elbow out in front of them and really like push the ball, getting under the ball. All of that stuff to me is just that like they don't really know how to like move and use their core to generate the throw. That doing some like basic things during that time frame of their life of just like throwing med balls and learning how to sequence their body and jumping and running, all of those things are going to help them do that, right? And so I think that's the main point I want to pull out of this section is that building general athleticism and movement quality in any type of sport that you're doing, that you're pursuing, that should be one of the biggest foundations I think we set for throwers. Okay, that those things are all going to really help them be better throwers, and some things that we can really look into when they're at this kind of stage and starting to take training or practice or competition a little bit more seriously. But it's also really going to set the stage, set the foundation for the long-term success and injury prevention that ultimately for younger players, one of the biggest culprit for or the biggest issue that could happen for any of these players is that they spend time out of the game or practice or training due to injury. Okay? So if we do anything within any of these segments, really, yeah, but especially the earlier ones, it's just so detrimental to their long-term success that you really have to evaluate where and when to push the envelope, and is the risk really worth the reward? So some of this all kind of comes into how I'd summarize it maybe in one sentence is better movers adapt faster, they generally hold their velocity longer, and they repeat their delivery more often, right? Movement's the base of every elite arm. Okay, they move well. They have general athleticism that helps them do that. I think something that's really important to note in this section, about that sentence right there, is that everybody has this conception that the best pitchers or people repeat their delivery more often than other people, and that's why they're elite. we can actually see through our motion capture lab that that's not true. Okay, that's not true. What they do better is they have enough athleticism and they self-organize their body well enough through their mechanics. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's some huge like variance, but it's not the same every single time. What they're really good at is organizing their body, really no matter if there are slight degrees that are difference, to execute the throw and the pitch to its landing spot or where they're trying to get it to go to. So this this thought that like they literally just like do it the exact same way every single time is wrong. They have variances in theirs too. They're human. They're not going to move the same way in space every single time. They're not going to generate the same amount of force that goes into the ball every single time. But what they're really, really good at is they have good enough movement quality and athleticism to organize all those things to still get the same output, even though, maybe, from point A to point B to point C up the chain isn't going to be the exact same. The output's going to be generally the same. And I think us as humans just like, well, we just kind of assume and look at that and say, oh, well, he just repeated a delivery really well. It was like, yeah, to some extent for sure. I'm not suggesting there's huge variances in like really elite caliber throwers and pitchers. But what we can see is that they still have windows of where they're not repeating their delivery, and you can see on a pitch with like live data feedback that the movement or the force production wasn't the same, but the ball went to the exact same place at the exact same velocity and the exact same like movement profiles. How does that happen? If you start talking about like, process versus outcome, with the outcomes the same, we assume the process is the same, and it's actually not. So that's why a lot of those athleticism things at early ages and us not like rushing too quickly to gain velocity or load up a bar and get strong or talk about, 4, 5, 6 different pitches, pitch grips, and making it more complex. That look, if the more we do that and the less we take the focus away from movement, quality, and athleticism, the worse our foundation for long-term success is getting. And that's the point. Okay. So next segment. Strength capacity and force production. Okay. I started to read through some of this earlier. I wanted to just kind of like talk about some of it for sure, because we've already talked about this in future topics. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker in this segment because I want you to go back and listen to the full episode with Nolan and I talking about some of the force production, rate of force development. He certainly can talk about all those things way better than I can. Okay. But some of the differences of being strong and having usable strength. Okay. We talked about that a little bit. Baseball strong versus weight room strong. Obviously, well, we're not training to be Olympians. We're training to be baseball players, and we have to supplement that with what we're doing on the field. Force production, rate of force development, both of them matter. We need to generate force. We need to generate quickly. The swing happens in an instant. Once your front foot kind of hits the ground, your force development into the baseball happens quickly. We want to rotate quickly in tight windows, okay? We need to build up that capacity for the volume and intensity throughout the season because those things ebb and flow, okay? The volume and intensity in the weight room is secondary to what we are doing and exerting and feeling throughout the season, and those things need to, supplement what we're doing on the field very well. Not just for performance optimization, but for injury risk mitigation as well. Okay. The off season and in season differences in strength and strength development. Obviously we've talked about in a couple past episodes. I asked Cody Fick last week, if there's one thing that you would tell every player can't miss things to do in October. He said, man, get in the weight room. Get in the weight room. This is the cleanest, time that you have to build that strength-based capacity when you're not really at such a high demand of throwing the ball or swinging the bat. It's your best couple months ahead of you here to execute those things. Okay. And then we want to talk about a little bit, the transfer from the weight room to the mound. We want to really understand what we're doing in the weight room and how that like couples and coincides with what we're doing out on the field. That ultimately, if it doesn't produce that success on the field, then it's all for nothing. We're wasting our time. Okay. We start to talk about kind of integrating some data and all those things, force plates, TrackMan, mocap, and all those things into the training decisions that we make. they can just really help guide us in some of those decisions and some of the things that we're looking to, do on the field, that when we take these big sample sizes of data and we see what high performing throwers, hitters, and people do, we can create really good benchmarks to really try to quantify and identify progressions and regressions with inside of these segments, to know if like you're checking these boxes well enough relative to your peers. And I think that's some of the point is everybody can collect data. Drew just said this earlier. I'm going to steal it, Drew. Everybody can collect data, but like, what the heck are you going to do with it? And that's ultimately like where the sweet spot is. Here's the little like sentence tagline I've got, for this segment. I'll read it right back to you like I've been doing. Strength is the currency that buys you velocity and longevity, but only if it's developed and applied the right way. Okay. Like those should be your investments. Those are like your deposits you're making in the bucket right now in October that you're hoping to cash in March. And that's like the mental, lens or the view that you need to look at this through. That it's not just going to happen for you for no reason. Okay. So we check some of those buckets and we get those things accomplished. And we get to those benchmark data points. I think that's what our coaches at our facilities do really well with some of the technology tools that we have, is that like, man, until you get to like this number, or this body weight or whatever have you in the weight room, we're really probably wasting our time talking too much about arsenal development, about, attack plans and sequencing, and any type of things that come after that. Because again, it's like process-driven goals versus outcome-driven goals. I already know what everybody wants to do. They want to throw strikes. They want to, throw harder, and they want to stay healthy. Okay. But how are we going to get there? And I think that's the point. Okay. So we check those boxes and we go into the next segment. The next segment I got identified here is arsenal development and pitch design. Okay. I'm going to say this sentence very, very direct and very, very clear. And I think everything I'm going to talk about after this will help drive this home. But this is the point. I don't want you to miss it. Okay. If you're getting up on the mound and you're wanting to execute your breaking ball or even your fastball, say it's a fastball that's got some movement on it. If you're wanting to execute your pitch, okay, you don't release it generally in the same spot every time. We already talked about some of the variants, so I'm going to say generally. Okay, we don't release it generally in the same spot every time with a similar hand position that produces a similar movement profile. Okay, very simply, if the ball's breaking a little bit different every single time, you have no idea where to start it for it to end up in the same place. Okay, so the thing that we've got to do first, we've got to move well, we've got to build up strength and the force production, ultimately to generate the force into the baseball we're looking to do. But then we've got to get our movement profiles, our shapes and breaks consistent. And I think what I see way too many young players doing, especially, is trying to backdoor sliders and do this and do that. We're making things so complicated, I think, across the board that you don't really know what the pitch is even doing. So how you even know where you're going to throw, like where it's going to land, where you're going to start it. Okay. So I get like in the game, we should be trying to execute to like sides of the plate, quadrants of the plate, some count management, and we're going to get there. We're going to talk about some of that stuff. Absolutely. That's the tip of the spear and the point that we all strive to get to as pitchers. But if it's shaping differently every single time, then you won't have success. So I know you want to execute that breaking ball down and away to a righty, to your glove side, whatever. I know you want to do that, but we're so quick to try to do that to see if you can do it that you don't understand what the ball's doing even to get there. That, man, just why don't we throw some breaking balls in our bullpens and our practices down the middle and just practice down the middle and getting it to shape and break the same way every single time. Then once you get it shaping and breaking the same way, then we take it to the corner. Okay. And that's strictly for like practice purposes. Okay. I'm not suggesting, throwing hangers down the middle in your game in April and then you're blaming me. Okay. I'm talking about for practice plans here. Okay. I got guys coming in watching them throw bullpens. It's the third bullpen, they've thrown in January and we're flipping in a backdoor slider, like, no chance, bro. Let's throw that sucker down the middle, and especially if you're 16, let's figure out how it's moving first, and really drive home like a key quality sequence for you and your arsenal before we get too far on down the line here. Okay. So pitch design comes after movement and strength established because of some of those, progressional things that we talked about. I'm going to skip through that bullet point here. I think that's pretty obvious. Understanding your pitch shapes, your spins, and movement profiles. I started with that. I wrote it down second on here, but I started with that because that's basically the whole point of this section, is that if we don't start there, then the rest of it doesn't matter. Okay. But then after that evolves and you start to accomplish some of that, you start talking about arsenal development as a whole and you want to build complementary pitches off of your fastball. Okay. And what I think a lot of people get sidetracked on is maybe, well, first off, not understanding those things. That's totally fine. That was me too. Okay. I was a 17-year-old kid that thought I threw 5 different pitches and had no idea what they were shaping and breaking and doing. And I didn't know how to attack a hitter with them. So, this is all hindsight for me as well. But, as far as like those complementary pitches, you're trying to create pitches. Once you establish your fastball, you're trying to create pitches that look like your fastball for as long as they can. And then at the last second at the plate, they're not. A word or a phrase we use to do it is like tunneling and separation, right? We want the ball to tunnel out of our hands. So like when I let go of a fastball, the fastball comes out and does this. Well, I let go of a slider, it comes out just like this fastball, and then it's not. Okay. Or the same thing with a changeup, and it's not. Same thing with a curveball, and it's not. What I think you need to do as the pitcher is that you need to understand where your fastball plays. Okay. If you have a 4-seam fastball, it's going to play in different parts of the zone than a 2-seam fastball is. Okay. If it's got good, riding or horizontal metrics to it, you need to understand those things. A 2-seamer is going to be more of a in to out type of pitch because it's got more horizontal lateral movement. And a 4-seamer is going to be generally more of a vertical profile that's going to play better at the top and bottom of the zone. And understanding those things and what your fastball does first and foremost, because it's the foundation of your pitching arsenal, whether you throw it the biggest percentage of the time or not. Real quick on that. The reason that is because hitters want to hit fastballs. Okay, so even if you're going to be a guy that throws 50% sliders or more, hitters don't walk up there and say, oh man, I want to hit this slider. Okay, because if you're throwing it 50% of the time, it's probably because it's good. So hitters want to hit fastballs. So everything works off your fastball, whether you throw your fastball the most or not. I think a lot of people get that wrong, which is why I want to take a minute to, talk about that directly. But understanding what your fastball does is the foundation for building your arsenal. Okay. If the next pitch that you go to try to learn how to throw doesn't complement well off of that, you're always going to be like swimming upstream. You're always going to have friction in this. You're always going to be throwing that pitch and executing it roughly where you wanted to, and giving up too many hits on it, or trying to throw it to a certain part of the zone and, not being able to land it there, or whatever the case may be, right? So generally speaking, horizontal profile fastballs tunnel better with horizontal profile off-speed pitches, okay? I said earlier, like a 2-seam would be more of an in-out type of thing because a 2-seam would come in and ride more to my arm side. So a good cutter or a good slider that, tunnels more to your glove side, that pitch is going to come in. One's going to go this way and the other one's going to go that way. Same thing for a 4-seamer is going to come and have this riding effect. It obviously doesn't go up because of gravity, but it's going to have this good straight, ride. And then a curveball or a negative, straight down vertical break is gonna tunnel and pair well off of that. Okay, we're just trying to create separation in our secondaries so that we're getting as far off of our fastball that we can without giving it up too soon, right? Because if the ball pops up out of our hand, we got to do some crazy thing with our grip to get it there. It's usually just kind of signaling to the hitter too soon. They can make those types of adjustments, especially the better hitters that you continue to face. Okay. So, some of these data tools that we have and that we can use to leverage some of this from a motion capture standpoint, figuring out where the arm and hand and, finger positioning is all at. If you have a very basic Rapsodo TrackMan or camera like Edgertronic setup, you can see in real time, what your pitchers are doing, right? So identifying first what your fastball is, building an arsenal around that to, complement the fastball well is a really good idea. Okay, and every time you go to create a new secondary pitch, you've got to understand, how you're actually going to throw it to hitters, what they're going to see. That's the main thing. Like what's a hitter going to see when I throw this pitch and he's seen my other pitches? Okay. I think too often we're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to throw a changeup because I'm going to throw a changeup. It's like, nah, man, like think about it for a sec. Okay. And at the end of the day, like if you get down to it, understanding that like you're growing and evolving, especially if like you're a younger player, I'll tell you right now, I got drafted in the 3rd round out of University of Missouri, throwing all 2 seams and cutters, okay, and had some success. And then I got later in my life and I realized actually I'm a 4-seam guy, and I started throwing way more 4 seams, cutters, and curveballs, and still had success. Okay, so understand this is all an evolution. It's an evolution of you mentally, physically. But I think understanding maybe like what you're trying to do in that whole thing, instead of it just being like, oh, here's my grips, so I'm just going to throw them because, I watched TV last night and the guy was throwing a, split changeup, so I'm going to throw it now. Oh, look, it moved pretty good. Now I'm going to take it to the game. Like that's not how it should work. Okay. I tell people this all the time. I ask players, I say, how many pitches you got? And they say, oh, well, I got 6. I got a 4-seam, I got 2-seam, I got changeup, whatever. They list them all out. And then we watch them. And I end up telling him, I say, you've got 6 grips. You don't got 6 pitches. You've got 2 or 3 pitches because they move well. But you've got 6 pitching grips. That doesn't mean you've got pitches. So jokingly lighthearted, obviously. But my point is that, like, just because you can hold the ball a certain way and get it to like do a little bit of a thing during a catch play or even on the mound, like in my personal opinion, that doesn't really mean it's a good quality pitch that you should have in your arsenal that you go to when stuff's on the line, 2nd and 3rd, and you're throwing your 4th best pitch here. To me, it all like comes down to identity. That younger players typically, and that's okay. It's part of the evolution. Like younger players don't really understand their identity and how they get outs and what's effective against hitters. And a lot of things when you're younger playing baseball seem to like, really just be like, it happened that way, it happened chance type of thing. And when you really start to kind of like look at, and baseball certainly is a game of that, right? Like you can throw a great 2-seamer in on a guy's hand, break his bat, flips it over the first baseman's head, for sure. That's this game. What players do really well at higher levels, they understand it's all percentages, and I'm just trying to do what puts me in the biggest percentage chance for success. And I'm not letting any distractions get in the way of that for as long as humanly possible, because that is my best chance for success, okay? None of it's like just random. And I think that's a really good key point that to drive home to younger players, okay? But yeah, I mean, so to get back some of the data tools, it's really good to have some of these feedback loops so you can see the repeatability, you can see the movement profiles, you can understand if it's shape and break in the same way, you can put it in different parts of the zone then after that, and understanding like what your pitches are doing when they come out of your hand first and foremost. And that's really the point of like arsenal development and pitch design, right? Okay. Pitch design's really, this is the sentence I wrote down about this one. Pitch design's the art that comes after the science, right? The sports science is more of the assessments and force production, rate of force development, your motion capture, biomechanics stuff. But it only works if the athlete's body can create what the data suggests over a long period of time, I might add too. Okay. So that's what we're kind of trying to do. That segment, we're really kind of getting out of like the process that creates the pitch, and we're starting to get into, the outcome of said pitch. Once it leaves my hand, then it's going to do what it's going to do, right? And that's what pitch design is. We're trying to get, all the movement quality, all the force development stuff, all of the mechanical conversations, timing, sequencing, timing things that we're talking about. Now the ball's out of your hand, it's flying through the air, and we're starting to think about what the hitter's seeing when the ball's flying at him, okay? And that takes us into our last segment here that I've got listed down as, attack plans, sequencing, and execution. This is the segment that we all strive to get to. A polished pitcher is what we would call them. And I said this at the beginning of the recording here. I'll say it again. In April, you've got to attack. You've got to throw your best pitches. You've got to dominate the strike zone. These things are absolutely, like the biggest, most important thing when it comes to game time. Okay. All those other things basically is talking about pitching and physical development. Okay. Um, but your preparation basically on your day to day is what ultimately leads to that execution on the mound. Okay. What I tell pitchers all the time, especially younger pitchers, I keep saying that broken record, but I know the younger ones definitely need to hear it more often. The preparation for the execution, buzzword I throw at them all the time is play catch like a pitcher. Okay, play catch like a pitcher. Don't just go out there to play catch. You're not just like getting your arm loose. We get loose. We get loose. We warm up to throw. We don't throw to warm up type of things. It's another one that gets thrown out a ton by me. But that preparation on a day-to-day basis and how you go about throwing a baseball is ultimately what's going to lead you to executing when you get on the mound. Okay, if you can't challenge yourself to execute while you're playing catch, you should never expect yourself to get up there and execute when it's on the mound. Things are moving way faster. There's way more external distractions. Okay, you've got a whole side of this too that is now on the attack plan side of things, of like the mental and strategic layer of all these things. Okay, you've got scouting reports, you've got reading hitters' swings, you've got setting hitters up. And a lot of those things, they take a lot of time and experience and being around a lot of good individuals that can show you things and body language type of things. And to be honest with you, this segment is an entire topic in and of itself, and maybe a couple. But those are kind of some of the things that you would start to get into when talking about attack plan sequencing and execution. Getting into like predictable patterns, is an obvious thing that inside of this like segment that we want to try to avoid. But I also think that developing a really good go-to sequence and the confidence and the conviction behind it is also really critical. That at the end of the day, like, you need to have your own best sequence. You need to throw it really, really often, and you don't adjust that until the hitters make you adjust it. Okay. I think everybody in the pitching world gives hitters. We tend to give hitters a little too much credit at times, thinking we need to change things up before we actually need to. And then we look back on it and be like, oh yeah, I got cute right there. Well, what's the got cute mean? The got cute means like you shifted up before you needed to, very simply. So develop a sequence. My sequence, when I was, later on in pro ball, I understood this a little bit more about myself, was, a good fastball, four seam down in the zone, a good breaking ball down in the zone for a strike. And then I could throw a good breaking ball down in the zone, or I could throw another four seam at the top or above the strike zone. That's how you would try to create a sequence. To me, it doesn't involve three pitches either. To me, it's your best 1-2 punch. You probably got different sequences for different types of hitters, guys that swing at the first pitch, guys that don't. Right-handers versus left-handers. Is it the second inning game? Is it the seventh inning game? But you have, generally speaking, best case scenario sequence that you need to develop. Okay. In-game adjustments become very awareness, self-awareness, and kind of some processing of that feedback. Hitters being real early on pitches, real late on pitches. If I'm just really not landing my breaking ball very good that day, I'm not going to go to it as much. And that's okay. I think you need to figure out those times, and you need to understand that going into it. Because if you're the guy that goes in there and just like beating a dead horse, and you're trying to throw that breaking ball, you're trying to throw it, and you're in bad counts, you're either going to get pulled out of the game because you walk too many guys through too many pitches or whatever or you're going to be 2-1 too many times, and then you're going to throw a fastball in there and you're going to be picking it up off the warning track. Okay. So having some type of self-awareness in there, very, very critical. And we're talking about actually applying it within the game. Okay. Consistency becomes a really, really, big topic in there. If we're preparing like we should on a day-to-day basis, you put yourself in the best chance to be consistent, but at the end of the day, you can prepare really well, and it's just going to ebb and flow how consistent you execute from game to game. Okay. You're going to have different fatigue levels, stress levels. You got travel that comes into all of that. A lot of things definitely to consider that impact your consistency. Okay. But at the end of the day, like this all kind of comes down to, and like, baseball IQ. We're really getting into a deep layer of like baseball IQ here. It's really not just a weight room or mechanics or type of thing. It like I said, it's a really long conversation. It's longer, even just one podcast episode, certainly. But this culmination of years worth of experience, reading swings, and being around other pitchers and coaches that can help you see and learn and understand things. That it also, at the end of the day, I think I can tell you, and a lot of times words just don't do it justice. Once you see and you feel, what it feels like to be, in a 2-0 count with the bases loaded, and I'm going to throw a cut fastball in here to a lefty, and it's going to break his bat, and I'm going to pick the ball up and throw it home for a, 1, 2, 3 double play. It kind of hits home a little bit more than oh, I'm 2-0 with the bases loaded, like, 1 out, like, guess I got to throw a fastball here, or just like catcher puts down a finger and you just throw it. Like, you start to wrap your head around, and you get more confidence, I think, that way too. Like, the more you see it and feel it and try it for yourself, you build up some confidence that way. So, we definitely don't win games with any of the metrics or any of the force production things that we do. We win them with execution, and that's ultimately where we all need to be striving to get to. But I think understanding how we're going to get there and what things we keep the main things during these different training ages, to me, that everybody's going to get to that attack plan a little bit differently, where that's the main thing in their to me, that's more of like your professional guys. Your college guys is more of like your arsenal development and pitch design, maybe some advanced high school guys. Most of your high school guys are going to be your strength, capacity, and force production guys, and your youthers are going to be your movement, quality, and athleticism. I think you can keep it as simple as that, okay, and understanding your trajectory as a baseball player, okay? So I think really just keeping those things, the main things, encourage you all to like really think very long-term about this and creating sustainable long-term success, not chasing the radar gun in the next 3 to 6 months. Albeit, like it's enticing, and I know that's what everybody wants to see it of you. I get it. I live the same thing. But building a foundation for long-term success, for health and performance reasons, is going to be like what really helps you get to where you want to go. And I get the urge to fight the thought that if I could just gain 6 miles an hour, push everything else aside. If I could just gain 6 miles an hour between now and February or March, all would be good in the world. And that's just not the case. Okay. It's just not. If you guys want to learn more about individualizing development program stuff, that's definitely what we do at, Premier Pitching Performance. We've got great assessments. We've got great training at our locations. We've got great remote training that you can do to still get training in programs like this, and do it at your gym or field or practice or whatever have you. It's really just not about chasing, that next tool. It's about mastering this process that helps kind of connect them all. And that's why, I've kind of coined our process as our comprehensive assessment approach. We don't get to help and see players on the field too much during their stuff. Our job and role is to help them kind of build the engine that drives that once they get out there. Certainly have our own experience and knowledge and love to have the conversations, of the attack plans and all those things later on. But building engines definitely what we do at a really high level, if I do say so myself. So really appreciate you guys. Thank you for checking out this episode. If you guys got any thoughts or comments, feel free to drop them down. Questions about any of the topics, things you want me to expand on, I'm happy to do it. I feel a little bit like I was rambling this episode because there's a lot of different things and all these different segments, that we could really talk about. And maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe that is what I'll do, is I'll go through some of more, attack plans and sequencings for these different scenarios, because I think there's a lot to unpack there. So really appreciate you guys. Appreciate you checking this out. Make sure you like and comment, subscribe down there below. We'll see you guys next time.